Hi, I'm Matt Youngs, your President of the Students' Union.
And I'm Anna, Education Executive Officer.
Now, you submitted some questions through our COVID Q&A portal that we've then put to the university senior management, and we've got some answers for you. So we're going to talk you through some of the answers they provided, have a chat about it, but then we'll also provide a link so you can read the answers in full and hopefully get your head around it too. We're going to start off with learning and teaching, something that's been on the mind of everyone here at Loughborough. And in particular, something that came up an awful lot was this idea of a safety net policy, which some other universities is sometimes called a bit of a no detriment policy. Can you talk us through the safety net policy that we've got here at Loughborough?
Yes, of course. And I'm really happy you flagged that, because what we've noticed by collating the feedback received from students is that many of our students are not aware that the safety nets have actually returned. And I think that is something we should definitely put our hands up for and really try and make sure that students are aware of it. The safety nets have been reintroduced for this academic year back in December, actually. So before we were aware of anything that happened post-January time. And what they basically do at the UG and PGT level is ensure that the university takes into account the changes and the challenges that have been kind of put forward by the pandemic when it comes to the students' learning and teaching conditions. So we have 4 safety nets. Each one of them kind of tackles a different aspect of the student life. One of them is heavily focused on mitigated circumstances, and we've actually made improvements to it this year, whereby students no longer require hard evidence to submit MC claims, which is super important, especially during this period of time when well-being is a hot topic of conversation, as it should be, both mentally and physically. And students are really encouraged to put in MC claims forward, even if they don't feel like they have enough evidence. Another one of them is going to look at program level grades. So whatever students in a particular cohort are going to achieve, that is going to be compared with the past 2 or 3 years, I believe. Please don't quote me on that. It's all on the website. From what I remember, I think it's 2 or 3 years. So what's going to happen then is, so let's say Part B, ITMB, that was my course, received 50% overall this year, whereas last year they had 65%. There's a clear margin between the two of them, which means the university will take into account the fact that that is such a big boundary between the two of them, and it's going to probably upscale it as a result of it. So that's how that safety net works. Then they're going to have one at modular level. So instead of looking at the program, they're going to look at a specific module. Same kind of theory behind it. If students on a module are significantly behind what they used to be, then they will intervene in that space. And the last one, if I'm not mistaken, is about finalists and is about their grade boundary, I think it's called. So same thing, they're going to be looking at how the student has performed before, how the student has been forecasted to perform, and depending on what grade they obtain, they're going to look at and take into consideration all the other safety nets and ensure that they stay within the boundary that they've previously had. I think that sums it up. PGT safety nets are slightly different because our PGT students stay with us only for a year. So there's almost nothing to look behind, because many of them would have studied at different institutions, and it has different intricacies as well. So I would strongly suggest our PGT students to also have a look at their safety net and see how that is going to be taken into effect within their academic journey.
Goodness me, that's very comprehensive. Thank you, Anna. And I think it's really important you spoke about mitigating circumstances claims and the fact that the university is taking that into account this year. And we've got one of the responses from Jennifer Nutkins, who's the academic registrar at the university, has said that they have significantly relaxed the requirements for evidence given the pandemic context. But one of the questions that came in was, how do mitigating circumstances work? And if a student is on the fence, is it worth submitting one?
So, mitigated circumstances extends to encompass a lot of sub-themes and themes. And I don't think I would be doing it justice to try and explain it in on one go. what I would strongly recommend. And I feel like I've only discovered this as a sabbatical officer, not as a student. So I would really, really, really encourage students to look through their student's handbook. So literally, if they go on loughborough.ac.uk and type in student handbook, it's going to provide them with a lot of useful information about what they should be expecting on their academic journey, whether UG, PGT, or PGR. Now, within the student handbook, mitigated circumstances is one of the areas that is being covered. And at the basis of it, what it says is that if students are experiencing circumstances that are outside of their control, i.e. pandemic, they should be looking at putting in a mitigated circumstances claim or form. It depends, like it's referred as one or the other. Now, students could experience a lot of different things, whether it's about their mental well-being, physical well-being, whether it's actual, like anything else that happens that they do not have any control over, grievances, personal matters, and so on and so forth. All of these classify as mitigated circumstances by the university. And that's when students are encouraged to put them forward. Jennifer Nutkins is absolutely correct in saying that they have significantly improved it, because in the past, they used to need and require hard evidence for genuine mitigated circumstances. We've had a look at the language, we flagged it with the university and said, look, we need to have a bit of a more inclusive angle when it comes to MCs. And this is all down to all the efforts that we've done as a union, and especially to Lsuadvice, who I thought I could mention right here when we're talking about the MCs. So Lsuadvice is our non-judgmental confidential service that we provide when students are faced with any conflict of interest when it comes to the university. We have 4 incredible and trained advisors that are here to provide you with help and support, whether you want to take anything forward or whether you don't. They're always going to be here to advise you. They operate at both campuses, so London and Loughborough inclusively. And you can get in touch with them via email. I'm not sure if the email is going to pop up. We're just going to pretend that it does. But if it doesn't, you can just simply go to lsu.co.uk, and under academic experience, they have a specific section dedicated to it. I think they have some great FAQs in terms of whether you should be using the service or not. They can advise you on what you should be using the service. And it ranges from MC claims to appeals to parking offenses and anything in between. And we really, really want to raise visibility of this and ensure that students are provided with the support when trying to put in claims or going forward for appeals or even complaints to the university, which I'm sure we can talk about in a bit when we're talking about tuition fees.
That's spot on, Anna, and I think it's really important to emphasise that students should reach out to Lsuadvice if they feel like they want support with submitting a mitigating circumstances claim. So the email for Loughborough University and Loughborough College students is lsuadvice@lsu.co.uk. For those students who are on our London campus, it's lsulondonadvice@lsu.co.uk.
Thank you, Matt.
Very welcome.
Would you like to give us a bit of a kind of overview of how the tuition fees conversation is currently going within our student body based on the feedback we've received?
Yeah, so the discussion about tuition fees and refunds or partial refunds is not something that is new this year, even though COVID is very much new this year. But we've had it in previous years when we've had strike action and students have been unable to attend lectures or workshops. And as a result, the conversation comes up again about tuition fees and value for money and getting your student experience out of what you're paying for. And actually, Andy Stevens, who's Director of Finance, has provided us with a really good answer, and you can read the answer in full on the website, and we'll link it in the description. But it's, for me, very comprehensive, and I think there are a few more follow-up questions that we've got from it as well. But certainly when we think about the university's business model, as Andy explains it in his answer, the notion that the revenue, the income that the university gets from the fees that students pay, actually goes on to an awful lot of spending, and that's not just sort of the flashy new buildings that we see on campus. And indeed, conversations I've had with Andy and Richard Taylor as Chief Operating Officer, the university has suspended all of its capital project work at the moment because it shouldn't be spending money on that at the moment. It can't afford to. But actually, when students pay fees to the university, then a lot of that will go on to staff costs. So all of the academic, but also professional services staff have got to have their salaries paid, regardless of whether students are here or not.
Absolutely.
And as a result, you'll have to quote me directly on this from Andy's answer, but is it something like 50% of all of the university's costs are on staff, and 50% of tuition fees goes on staff costs? Is that right?
Yes, I think you're absolutely right.
Which is really interesting, because you often think about your tuition fees will just go on sort of keeping up facilities and stuff like that, but actually lecturers are still lecturing. They're doing it in a very different way, so their salaries still have to be paid. And Andy makes the point in his answer, the fact that actually more time has had to have been put in this year in terms of thinking about how they are going to deliver teaching and learning this year compared to previous years. That the time cost side of things is actually slightly weighted more heavily towards it taking longer to provide teaching and learning this year compared to previous years. And Andy also makes the point, and this is something that I learned quite early on in my time on exec, in terms of his introduction to Loughborough University and its finances, where the university will spend if you think about the university's revenue as a whole for a year as being a £1 coin, the university will spend 99p of that. And every single year, that single penny that they put into savings, obviously massively scaled up for the university, but it's something that they keep aside for a rainy day situation, as those in the finance world call it. And COVID has very much been a rainy day situation. It's been a rainy year. Yes. And as a result, the university has been in a position that it has been able to make decisions that support students. And really good example of that is waiving all rent payments for students in halls of accommodation that cannot return to Loughborough. And they did that last year when we went into the first lockdown in spring 2020, and they've done that again this year. And whilst we all appreciate and respect it for being an incredibly generous move, I don't think any of us had thought about the financial implications of that. And in Andy's answer, the fact that he says it costs approximately £1 million a week for the university to waiver those rent payments really does put it into perspective, and makes you realise just how much the university is eating into its cash reserves to support students. So I think the conversation around tuition fees is obviously a lot more complex and complicated than just a case of, I'm not getting in-person teaching this year, can I have my money back? Which I think is a completely understandable position for students to be in. I'm fortunate enough that I'm now in a full-time job, but if I was a student still this year, I think I'd be asking the same question, because I want to know that I'm getting value for money. But the fact that the university is being more transparent about where that money is going, and the fact that the money it is spending is going to be spent regardless of whether students are on campus or not, is a really important and a really good piece of transparency from the university there. But I wonder whether you could potentially come in here, Anne, and talk about, if a student is not satisfied with the experience they're getting, how do they go about resolving that?
Absolutely. So the first point that I would kind of like to make in this, Matt, is that I would really, really encourage students to think not whether they're getting their worth for the buck, I think is the expression, probably got it a bit around. What they should be asking themselves, if it's whether Loughborough University as an institution is helping them achieve something we call ILOs, which are intended learning outcomes. So if you want to have a conversation about how the tuition fees you pay have an impact on your intended learning outcomes, then I think that puts you into a really, really good spot to have that conversation, actually. So what happens is, when you sign up to any institution, you are promised something, right? You're told, if you come with us on this program and you stay with us for 3, 4, 5 years, or whatever long you plan to stay, or even for a short time, like a PGT student doing a master's, or even longer, PGR student, doesn't matter. It's about the intended learning outcomes that you are promised that will be delivered by the institution regardless of the conditions that the institution has to operate in. Now, we cannot say that all students at the university have had their intended learning outcomes met. It's probably very hard to assume that that is the case during a pandemic. And it's not just our institution, it's a problem that is happening nationwide and in the whole of the sector that we're working in. If you feel like your ILOs are not being met, that's when you should ask the question. And the way you do it is in two main kind of stages. First, you have to raise a complaint to the institution that you're part of. That is what the government says. That is what the Department of Education says, Office for Students, and so on and so forth. So like all the governing bodies that are around the sector that will work with institutions to ensure that this is provided. after you do ask the question to your institution, the institution will scrutinize, will investigate, will check to see whether they feel like they've actually met the ILOs that they've promised you. And depending on how that goes, next would be raising a complaint with the OIA. So that, again, is a different external company or in a government body that will be able to help you when it comes to the tuition fees and then the rebate that you would be getting if you don't feel, and if the university fails to demonstrate that they have met your intended learning outcomes. I know we've talked about our colleagues at Lsuadvice before, and I'm going to continue probably doing so for the rest of my year in office, especially during such a hard year, but they will definitely be able to advise you on how to raise a complaint, how to get a complaint process put in place, and what that would actually mean in terms of time scale, in terms of what you need to provide, in terms of how that conversation will go with the university and then with the OIA. And I will make sure to provide some additional links and a full-on answer to this as we speak, just so you have more information, because I don't want to misinform you here. I would rather take the time to put it all together so you can definitely see what the OIA have had to say, what other governing bodies around the sector have had to say, and what the complaint process looks like at Loughborough University as well. But I'm going to circle back, and this is the only thing I want you to leave with if you were to take anything. Don't ask yourselves whether you're getting the money that you've put in. Ask yourselves whether your university is actually helping you hit your intended learning outcomes. And when you graduate, you're actually going to graduate with everything that you were meant to put you in a position to say that you are someone that is holding all this academic value, and the diploma that you get is something that you've gotten because you've had the best chance to succeed. And of course, student experience is something we always debate. We are the student experience, right? But the academic experience and the academic integrity that the university has to hold is what you should be holding them accountable for. Everything else that comes with it is something we will support with. And of course, we can't say that we've done everything perfectly either. It's a very hard year to navigate, both for the academic and student experience of all our students, regardless of their level of study. But hopefully we've done our best, and I think that is the way the conversation should be viewed as well. And hopefully what we're doing right now even is giving you a bit more insight into how these things have gone and what you should be doing forward and what questions you should be asking.
I think that's a brilliant point, Anna, and we'd really recommend that you read all of the answers in detail, but do have a look at Andy's response as well. He is the Director of Finance at the university. He's the man in the know, and he's been really helpful actually, because at the end of his response, he's put in a link which will take you to a university webpage where you can see a complete breakdown of the university's finances. You can see exactly where that money is going, so that if you do decide to go down the route of submitting a complaint to either the university or indeed after that the Office for the Independent Adjudicator, you know, and you're really well informed for actually how Loughborough University is spending your money. So I think it's a really important topic to cover. Let's now think about doctoral researchers and our postgraduate research community. So we asked the questions that you submitted and we've put them across to university colleagues, and they've been really helpful with providing some video responses, and they cover topics such as PhD students with caring responsibilities. What more could the university do to support PhD students during the start of the pandemic, but also beforehand? What could they have done better in the past? And so we're going to cross over now to Professor Liz Peel, who's Associate Pro-Vice Chancellor for the Doctoral College, who will hopefully shed some light on the questions you've been asking.
What has been the university's approach to PhD students since the start of the pandemic, and how are things working in lockdown 3? The two immediate things we did back in March have turned out to be exactly right. We advised students to plan for long-term disruption and revise project aims and plans wherever possible, with the goal that PhDs can keep to their original schedule. The second measure we took was to keep stipend funding in place, even if students were unable to research productively for whatever reason, and to increase hardship funding for others. The main consequence of these measures has been that most doctoral researchers at the university have been able to continue even in these really, really challenging times, and progression reviews and vivas have continued with minimal disruption, primarily online. I've been continually impressed with how doctoral researchers and supervisors have thought laterally and creatively and have largely managed to stay focused on their studies despite everything. We then turned our attention to registration and funding extensions, partly supported by additional UKRI funds, although these came with some restrictions. So far, we've spent nearly £200,000 on additional stipends and fee waivers. Not just via the student survey, but also in a variety of ways that have happened in the background. We've monitored student wellbeing to make sure that no students have dropped out of touch with the university. And we've launched one-to-one calls with the Doctoral College, which we're continuing through lockdown 3. We've been in dialogue with students all the way through, and we'll continue to do that. In such unprecedented times, we've all experienced disruption on a scale that can't be ignored, and we're not complacent enough to think that all our measures have worked perfectly for every student. But let's keep talking. We're constantly reviewing the support that we have in place. At the end of it all, the timely completion of excellent research is critically important to individual doctoral research students and the whole university. We want the same outcome.
Thanks so much for those responses, Liz. And we're going to have a little bit of a conversation now about the support that's been put in place for doctoral researchers from LSU. So, Anna, do you want to take us through what we've been doing?
Yes, Matt, of course. So I think we're going to go back to Lsuadvice just to make sure we flag that once more. But I think this is a really interesting one because normally, and I think historically, UG-PGT students have assumed that advice is for them, which is great. Our doctoral researchers, not as much. So clearly, we've tried to raise visibility within that space and really tighten the connections we have internally with the Doctoral College, with other postgraduate research community kind of representatives, and what that has looked like over the year. As a returning SAB and someone who hopefully has a bit more of an understanding of how our postgraduate research community has worked in the past, I have really tried to ensure that the relationships and the networks that we've built within that community remain in place. And not only that, but that they're open up to the rest of the sabbatical officer team as well. And I am so impressed and so happy to see that the current executive team has taken it as something that they want to invest their time into, and I feel like everybody is much more aware of doctoral researchers and the challenges that they are experiencing, especially during the pandemic. When it comes to what we've done in the space of academic representation, for example, we worked really closely this year with the doctoral researcher president team to ensure that our researchers have a space within the union to raise the challenges that they may be facing. We have increased the amount of meetings that we have. We now meet fortnightly and have a bit of a discussion about what that looks like. We've put in place meetings with the Doctoral College as well. Professor Lee Spiel, once again, super involved in that space and very much so helpful when it comes to having those conversations with the president team and with myself. We have been working with other staff members within the Doctoral College to really facilitate some events for their bigger projects, like the Doctoral Wellbeing Fortnight that is coming up. Alex Marlowe, our Wealth and Diversity Officer, and I have been spearheading that. We've recently actually been even involved in a BME PGR community bid that may be forming and might be coming from Loughborough for our fellow researchers and within that space again. And I think now, Matt, you are working with one of our presidents to put together a bit of a PGR community in terms of representation and what that's going to look like within the officer team. Do you want to talk us through a bit more of that?
Yeah, so we've had a really good meeting between myself and the doctoral research president's team. And off the back of that, we sort of realised that in previous years, we've often been sort of guilty of neglecting the doctoral research community, certainly at LSU. And as a result, something we've instigated is that we're going to have regular meetings between the executive at LSU and the doctoral research president's team. And from that, we'll have a really good practice sharing agreement. So we'll be able to raise issues that we've come across and ask doctoral researchers directly what they think about it. But also, if PhD students and postgraduate researchers have been experiencing some difficulty, they're not sure who to turn to or where to turn to, they can have that really easy dialogue between us as well, and we can take issues that they are raising directly to the university as well. So it's a really lovely sort of community that we form there and partnership, and hopefully it'll be a two-pronged attack, as it were, when it comes to championing and raising issues with the university.
Absolutely, and I think it's so important that we realize the underlying theme, which is that postgraduates, and whenever we're talking about postgraduate matters, they're not only academic matters, they encompass student experience just as much as anything else, or the experience of our researchers, and so on and so forth. So to see such a great effort led by the officer team in trying to tackling these, and maybe not tackling them this year, but starting by understanding them and laying foundations for the teams to come to really open up those conversations, I think it's going to be such an exciting project. And if there's something that is going to come out as a good and positive thing out of this year, especially within their space, I really hope that having a tighter relationship and working relationship with LSU representatives will be one of them, and as a forthcoming point, because they've done such incredible work over the past years. And I think within their own academic representation scheme and the support that they offer each other, they've done such a great job. It would be so great to hear about it and really capture that good practice to see how we can replicate that in other sections across the union. So I think that student staff partnership is going to come on top, and it's going to be very, very important this year.
And it's really nice what you're talking about in terms of Lsuadvice, this wonderful service here that we have at the Students' Union. And actually something that came to my attention in one of Liz's answers about financial hardship that not just postgraduate students may be experiencing, but also in undergraduates as well. And one of the bits in Liz's answer, she was talking about the University Hardship Fund, which we'll talk a little bit about in a minute. But she said that since the start of the pandemic, 27% of doctoral researchers have reported that they were facing financial hardship, which is actually a really high number. And the Hardship Fund has already been utilised by doctoral researchers, which is really good to hear. And Liz says in her answer that over £48,000 has been paid out from the university to support doctoral researchers. So what is this Hardship Fund and how can it support you as a student? And all you need to do is go onto the internet and type in Loughborough University Hardship Fund. You'll go directly to the relevant page. It's part of the Student Advice and Support Service that fits under Student Services at the university. And you can apply for emergency financial hardship. So that covers things such as you're not unable to pay your rent for this month, for example, or you desperately need a laptop to support your studies wherever you may be at the moment. But you can also apply for long-term financial support, and that really is sort of your safety net that the university is offering. So should you find yourself in financial hardship and financial difficulty, and I know certainly some of our students are experiencing that, and they've reached out directly to me at the Students' Union, but also to the university as well. I really urge you to go onto the university's Hardship Fund website, familiarise yourself with it, because you never know when you might need to use it. So I really do recommend that you visit that page as well.
I thought we could take some time to talk about well-being as well now. Obviously, in the feedback questions and queries we've received from students, many of them overall we're talking about their well-being and what the pandemic has meant and what kind of detriment it's had on their physical and mental well-being. And I thought it would be good for us to kind of have an overarching conversation about it based off of the responses that Veronica Moore, who's our head of student well-being and inclusivity, has actually provided. And just to kind of grasp it, like, what do you feel has been done in the space of well-being, and how would you say it's been going over the past months and year almost? Yeah,
so well-being and mental health is something that's at the forefront of all our minds at the moment, not just at university but in society more widely. So what I'll attempt to do is paint a picture as to the current status of the services at the university, but of course you can read the full answer from Veronica on the website that we'll link in the description as well, so you can familiarise yourself with that. So currently, all of the wellbeing services that are run by the university are all being delivered virtually, which means that they can be accessed by any student, regardless of whether they're in Loughborough at the moment or back home, wherever that may be. And that includes services such as the mental health support team, wellbeing advisors who are based in every academic school and department, of course, but then also the disability officers, counselling service, advice service, which we've already spoken about as well. And so all of those are being offered virtually, and so students can book an appointment, they can do that by going onto the website, and there's a really helpful and hopefully easy to navigate application form, as it were, where you can sort of give a few details about some of the difficulties or issues you may be experiencing or have come up against. And once you submit that, that's sent to a panel of experts and professionals in student services. They'll review your circumstances and assess what's the best support available to you, because a lot of people, when they think about student services and support at the university, their mind automatically goes to the counselling service, which is the one everyone has heard about, for good or for bad. But actually, there's a plethora of different services available to students, and for some students, actually counselling may not be the right service that they need, even if at the time they think that is what they want. So the panel will sort through every single case, and then they will allocate to the relevant service, and then a student will be contacted by the university. And then they'll have a virtual appointment, and that may be an initial one that then leads to subsequent appointments as well. And actually, some of the feedback, not just the Students' Union, but also the university has been that students have been really grateful for having virtual appointments, because it removes the barrier associated with having to travel all the way up to the student services building, and sort of the stigma associated with that and the nerves that people might understandably experience. So what I'd like to see from the university once sort of COVID is long behind us is actually the university moving to a model that gives students the choice, so that when you are first contacted to have a wellbeing appointment or a disability support appointment, the professional in student services will ask you, what kind of support would you like to receive? Would you like that to be in person or digital? And provide that student with the choice will be such a really good welcome change, and hopefully will make all of the services more efficient as well. So there's a whole range of different services that students can reach out to. Like I said, all of the details are on the Student Services website. But if you're really unsure where to start, and we've obviously got a fantastic Welfare and Diversity section here at the Students' Union as well, fronted by Alex, our Welfare and Diversity Executive Officer. And we've got our 9 associations, our student groups, some of whom touch on wellbeing and support. We've obviously got our fantastic Nightline service that both you and I know really well, having been former volunteers.
Together.
Yes, together. But obviously Alex is a wealth of knowledge as well, not just about support from the Students' Union and the university, but also more widely from external charities and organisations. So Alex's email address is WelfareEO@lsu.co.uk. Again, his contact details and a little bit of a spiel about him are all on the LSU website as well. So when you go to find the full answer from Veronica, do check out the Welfare and Diversity page as well, because I'd really recommend that. So hopefully that gives you a nice summary to wellbeing support currently available to students at the university.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Matthew, for that. That's so insightful. And I completely agree. I think what I've learned within the learning and teaching and kind of research space that I've been involved in is that realistically, if we were to revert to a model of normality, I think we would probably be going backwards a bit. If we were to discount of everything that has come out of this pandemic that's made us think outside the box in terms of, especially when it comes to in-person and dual delivery and what that's actually meant to students and how people now value their time in different ways as well. I think we could have an endless conversation about this. And I think, like, as you said, seeing the university move to a model where they would be providing an in-person alongside online possibilities for students to interact with some of their services could expand to the careers network as well, to all the way to having meetings with your personal academic tutor more frequently, maybe perhaps if they were to be done online, and so on and so forth. Like there are so many sub-themes to this that I really hope our institution considers exploring in the future, and I know they are. And I would really love to see what that's going to look like, what the new normal is going to look like. But I would like for us to be leaders in terms of defining what that normal is going to look like, rather than trying to revert to what things used to be. Because I think we could take a lot of good knowledge and just discard it if we are not careful. What do you think about that?
Absolutely agree. And I think it's something the Students' Union can learn as well. And hopefully we will remember all of the different diverse ways that we offered student opportunities and support to students during the pandemic, and hopefully we can apply the same principles going forward as well. So I think it's a really exciting time.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Matt. So what I think we could do is just to kind of wrap things up, just maybe touch upon some of the miscellaneous questions that we've had come in. Do you want to give us a bit of a run through of what students have submitted and what they should be expecting to receive answers to? And of course, these will be made available in the same format that we've had all the other questions being answered, but because they're quite niche and very specific and require a lot of technicalities. So for example, the Erasmus question, I think it's better for us to have them answered by the staff that have provided us with a lot of valuable information.
So let's think about the holistic view of Loughborough University in the coming months and looking towards the end of the academic year as well. So hopefully you will have received in the past few weeks a communication from the Chief Operating Officer and Vice-Chancellor informing you of hopefully the university's plan for returning students to Loughborough and to campus more widely. And when students return, something that we have already experienced even this morning is that we'll have a much bigger and mass asymptomatic testing regime. And so both Anna and I had asymptomatic tests this morning as well. Both came back negative, which is always good to hear. But something the Department for Education in the government is rolling out is twice weekly mass testing for all students at university. So that means that when you come back to Loughborough, or indeed if you are here already, you can expect to receive an asymptomatic test 2 times a week. That's from the Martial Arts Centre in the middle of the student village. And in order to ensure that campus is as COVID secure as we can possibly make it, the university has put in a few additional pointers, and that includes the usage of facilities and students being unable to use those facilities if they can't prove that they've had a negative asymptomatic test result. So, for example, one of those areas that has already implemented that is the library. So in order for a student to go to the library, they must prove that they've had a recent negative test result. And after that, obviously they can proceed as normal, ensuring that they comply with all social distancing, hands, face, space, making sure you're covering your face with a face covering or a mask. And that's something we can expect to see rolled out more widely, not just on our East Midlands campus, not just at the college, but also London campus as well. And hopefully, as the weather gets warmer and obviously the vaccination programme is expanded more widely as well, we can start to see campus coming back to life again, coming back to the campus that we all know and love, just in time for summer, so that hopefully some of the bars may be open. We can look to do some outdoor activity as well. And a lot of the questions that were submitted were to do with sport, and in particular the Athletic Union. And James, our Sport Executive Officer, and Rachel, our Athletic Union Clubs Officer, have been working really hard behind the scenes. And indeed, James last week put out a statement about club refunds and the work we are doing to support members who have already purchased memberships, and how we can look at providing some form of reimbursement if we need to get to that point as well. So look out for those. We'll put them on the same place that you can find all of the other responses provided by university colleagues. But I think, Anna, what would you reflect on in terms of what students can look forward to when they come back to Loughborough?
Very good question, Matthew. So I think reflection is probably based on what they should be expecting at the level of study they're part of. So whether they're finalists, whether they're first years, PGT students, PGR, and so on and so forth. So the university is currently moving towards a model of staggering return, which means that you hopefully would have heard whether you are going to be coming back sooner rather than later, depending on what you need to achieve your ILOs that we've talked about earlier, and what other things the university needs to provide you with just to make sure that you get the accreditations that you would need. So for example, if we're looking like at the Institute of Engineering, there will be certain things that our students, especially finalists that need to use lab equipment, would have to have done by the end of their academic year to be able to complete that and successfully graduate and progress in their academic journey. So the university is currently working with the Department of Education and the government guidelines that they have been releasing in terms of which programs and courses will be able to return. And based on that, and based on the kind of opportunities that arose within that space, they would have started inviting students to return back at different times. So obviously, this may not necessarily mean that your big lecture hall style components would be done in person. What it means is that you will hopefully get access to the facilities around campus that you would need, especially when it comes to STEM-based degrees and design and creative arts, and then all the other courses, majority sitting in the sport and exercise sciences that have been agreed by the DFE as being able to return to continue their studies in person. But I think people are working really, really hard behind the scenes to make sure that everything is being put into place for you and for your return. And I think it's safe to say that everybody's literally holding their breaths for students to be back, because we want the campus to come back. We want to be able to interact with students, and for students to hopefully be able to interact with each other as well. It's so important that we continue to work on these learning communities, because you will be hopefully coming back to a different year if you're coming back. And if you're leaving, I really hope you don't leave with a bitter kind of taste based on the year you've just experienced, and that we have the opportunity to kind of like work on that and make sure we say farewell, and that everything is going to be okay, and that you're always welcome to come back on our campus as well. And I think overall people are being much more positive, but also remaining realistic about what the end of the academic year is going to look like. And hopefully, as Matt has said, with everything that is being put into place, fingers crossed, by the end of this side of the academic year, we will be able to meet up and start reigniting some of the activities that we deliver as well, a lot of which have had to be done remotely over the past few months.
I think that's a really nice reflection from Anna as well. And just to wrap up, as it were, we really do recommend that you look at all of the full written responses provided by university colleagues. You can find a link to them in the description below. And if you do have any follow-up questions, or you want to have a bit more of an in-depth conversation with us, please do just reach out to us. So Anna's email address is educationeo@lsu.co.uk. Mine is president@lsu.co.uk. And one of the joys of this role is that we are in constant communication with the university and senior colleagues. And so that means that if you've got a question, we can immediately get an answer for you. And hopefully you found this video useful and interesting. We certainly had a really interesting conversation here. And so please, if you do have any further follow-up questions, please do reach out. But thank you for watching.
Thank you, everyone.